Hi everyone, it's William. This is the 1921 Grand Duke Dmitri Diary series. I have my serious scholarly jacket on today with leather arm patches because we are going into some serious historical text in Dmitri's diaries, and I hope you won't let that put you off. And I would in particular ask for your patience with this one because there's a lot to be said. If you really want to understand our friend Dmitri, you really have to understand the circumstances and the atmosphere that he was immersed in and what was important to him. These are things that were very important to him and had an effect on the shape of his life to come. And so if you're really just primarily interested in his personal life and his interaction with other Romanovs and with various celebrities, then that's fine. That's great. I have nothing against that. But if you want a deeper understanding of him and of Russian history, then I would urge you to watch this one through to the end, even if it ends up being a long one. Okay, so did I already mention, we're doing the long diary entry of the 15th of March, 1921. It's actually drawing to a close. It's not a super long one, but before he does close it, Dmitri has some very important things to talk about. So he's just finished up telling us about his impressions of the Kronstadt uprising in Russia, and now he's changing topic, as he's going to tell us quite explicitly. So, yeah, a recap from the previous one. At the end of the discussion of Kronstadt, he was, a little bit expressing some despair about how unlikely it seemed that any of the uprisings in Russia or any of the news from Russia, however good it might seem, would actually put an end to what he called the nightmare of the Russian Revolution and its repercussions. And we talked in particular about the Cadet Party, the Constitutional Democrats in Russia, and about their leader, Pavel Milyukov. And yeah, so that's it for the recap. Today, for our cast of characters, we have one individual whom you've already met, but I've learned a little more about him, so I will sort of reintroduce him to you. His name is General Nikolai Lavrentievich Galeevsky, very close to Dmitri in Paris. And then the other non-individual but group, like with the cadets and Milyukov, we have is the Berlin monarchists. And if there is a theme for this part of the diary, I'm not speaking about just this little section that we're going to cover today, but this whole Berlin incident, this whole Berlin phase in Dmitri's life, it would probably be the biblical phrase, pride goeth before a fall. So with that, let's dive into it, and we'll discuss it on the other side. Okay, here's Dmitri. Now I'm going to talk about something else, to wit, my visit to Berlin. I wanted to carry it out on the same basis as my private visits to London and Paris, i.e., in other words, to remain strictly within the limits of private life and not for anything to move forward into any kind of political role. But unfortunately, I failed utterly at that. I failed for many reasons. Firstly, because General Galeevsky, whom I asked to go there and prepare the ground, so to speak, and find out what was happening in Berlin before my arrival, completely failed to understand his role. And instead of simply finding out who lives where and who does what, he played the adjutant general on duty and, perhaps unwittingly, but nonetheless very definitely, gave my visit to Berlin the character of an official inspection. The other reason that my trip took on a rather official character is the very mood that prevails among the monarchists living in Berlin. They truly reacted in a touching way to my presence there, and in purely Russian fashion were a little too zealous in their desire to welcome me. But there too Galeevsky committed a gaffe. Instead of realizing that the more noise there is around my name, the worse it is for the cause in general, and for me personally in particular, he not only failed to put a stop to it or restrain the regimen of Berlin monarchists, but arranged my visit in such a way that it really resembled the arrival of a king or a prime minister on business of state. All these things are trifles, of course, but nonetheless, I cannot close my eyes to the fact that in my position, I can't adopt any open political role, and any such speech or the slightest hint of it peut être tourné au ridicule. And that, given the purity of the monarchical idea, must be avoided like the plague. Okay, so it doesn't sound like pride is going before a fall in this instance, but we will learn more about it. Okay, to return to Galeevsky. He was in his 40s, I said that, right? And something that is significant to me about him is that he was a Genstabist. So he was a member of the General Staff. He had graduated from the General Staff Academy, and the General Staff, the officers of the General Staff were by and large moderates politically, and their whole thing was the idea of professionalism in the military, and they wanted to see Russia do well in the sense of being a respected geopolitical entity, and that they were not at all zealots. There were almost all, if I recall correctly, it was almost all General Staff officers who came together and persuaded Nicholas II to resign. So they were the pragmatic influence in Russian thought at that time. And within the army, they were professional military officers, like you would have now, say, if you're American, you think of the Pentagon and the people there who they want to be cautious. They don't want to go to extremes. So that's important to me to know that Galeevsky was, in fact, a Genstabist. And he also had deeper ties to the United States than I at first realized. And again, I don't bring that up just because it's kind of interesting, but because I think it's significant. So he was the military attaché to the United States during part of the First World War. And after the First World War, this I really didn't know, he was employed at the American Embassy in Paris. So all this time when he was going to Dmitri's flat almost every morning to sort of give him a report and check in with him, he had a regular job at the American Embassy. So, yeah, and after the war, he would return to work for this time as a secretary at one of the U.S. consulates in France. So that was actually a very strong tie that he had with the U.S. And that, of course, makes me think about this connection that there seems to be between Dmitri and various people who were working as basically intelligence gathering. They were diplomats and military attachés from the U.S., and they seemed particularly anxious to be in touch with Dmitri, both in Copenhagen when he traveled there and in Paris. Not so much earlier on in London. So maybe it was specifically Galeevsky who sort of brought Dmitri to their attention. Galeevsky clearly wanted Dmitri to step into the void if the Bolsheviks were gotten rid of. And Galeevsky was one of the members of Dmitri's little intelligence group, the Information Bureau. And I suppose that, that gave him the ability to inform, if he was acting as an American agent himself, to inform the American intelligence gatherers themselves what kind of intelligence Dmitri was gathering and what he was up to. So I wouldn't say that, that he was stabbing Dmitri in the back in any way. I think he very sincerely was trying to promote Dmitri as a person of importance to his American employers. So, and he was very much acting as a kind of unpaid, unofficial adjutant to Dmitri. So, yeah, that's I find that really interesting, and it emphasizes to me that I still have a lot of research to do in figuring out this whole sort of intelligence angle and whether Dmitri has a dossier in the U.S. Okay, so now we talk about what Dmitri says about his reasons for going to Berlin, and he's really going to develop that more in the next section of this diary entry. So I won't go into too much detail about that, but I would guess that it had something to do with his sort of self-proclaimed mission of being an intelligence gatherer for himself on his own behalf. And he clearly did not have contacts in Berlin. He didn't have strong contacts in Berlin. So he wanted to send Galeevsky on before him to find out who was who, as he says, and what they were up to. And he didn't send Galeevsky or anybody like Galeevsky on before him when it came to his trip to Denmark. But this time, he wants the lay of the land, and he wants someone there making contact with people because he doesn't have contact with them, clearly. And okay, let's see. So, this isn't a trip to see old friends like the Marlings or other members of the family. You could say that it is a business trip as far as Dmitri is concerned. Yeah, so, what was I going to say? I just wanted to say with the French, I should do, for what it's worth, a translation of that. I'm not brilliant at translating French, but basically I gather what he's saying is that anything that he did in an overtly political role could very easily be ridiculed, and if it was ridiculed, then it would that would have bad repercussions for this ideal of this purity of the monarchical idea, as he puts it, and he doesn't want to do anything that is a stain on the purity of that idea. And I think we have a lot of personal desire and ambition mixed up with him trying to be restrained and trying to do the right thing and trying to offset his own desire to be sort of hailed as a hero and as the great hope of Russia. So he does have that desire. He totally has that desire, but he's trying to do the right thing. He's trying to not let that take control of him. So I like that about him. He knows that the people in Berlin are not the same breed as the emigres in Paris, and he talks about how their mood, that they're zealots, that they're zealous, and they're different from the French emigres. The emigres in France, they are sort of pumped up, and he finds it touching. Yeah, it strokes the ego a little bit, but he also is not so happy about their zeal. And it's interesting that he talks about it being in a purely Russian fashion, this zeal for him, this desire to welcome him, the fact that it's over the top, he characterizes it as being purely Russian. So I find that interesting. And he's already sort of comparing himself, or the perception of himself, to both a king or possibly a prime minister. So that's interesting. Okay, he's putting part of the blame here on Golevsky for having misunderstood him, but I think, come on, old boy, you send this guy who's basically your adjutant in advance to go and prepare the ground for you in Berlin. What do you expect? And you say there's this very zealous, upbeat, excited mood in Berlin. Well, Golevsky's going to respond to that, just as Dmitri himself is. So, anyway. So what were his reasons for going to Berlin? As I said, we'll be talking more about that later. I don't think he had any desire to move to Berlin. I don't think it was that. He was really, he liked Paris and he liked London. Germany was not the place for him. Okay, let's see. So, yeah, he doesn't want people to fuss over him, but he does want people to fuss over him. And that makes me think about Persia, because there was an instance in Persia where he was not being made a fuss over at all by Russian diplomats, even the pre-revolutionary Russian diplomats in Persia. But he was made a fuss over by the military there, by the Persian Cossack division, which was led by Russian officers. And there was one instance where he'd had a little too much to drink, and he had them all, line up in parade fashion before him, reviewing the troops, and that's exactly what he did. He did this sort of review, and he just loved that. Of course, he was a little drunk, but we all have that side to us. I will express the personal opinion that if he wanted, he's right to say that he shouldn't be overtly playing a political role in the sense of a partisan role. That's not what monarchs are supposed to do. So personally, if I could go back in time and advise him, I would say, as I've said all along in these videos, that what he could do to really establish himself as a leader and a positive figure and a potential tsar on that basis would be to be meeting with refugees and helping them as much as he could. And that could be completely apolitical. And that, in my opinion, is what he should have been doing. But he always loved politics. That was just his, he was passionate about politics long before the revolution occurred. So, we can't go too far in blaming him for focusing on what he liked and what he considered his strength, and in the ways that he thought he should be preparing himself. Yeah, so if I go on with this, I have this book with me. by the celebrated scholar Walter Lecoeur, and Russia and Germany. And to set the stage for all of this, I want to do some quotes from that. And so I have already gone 20 minutes, and I'm not going to ask you to watch a video for a half an hour. So even if I only get 1 or 2 views, I'm going to go ahead and do a separate video on this topic of the Russian monarchist community in Germany, mostly in Berlin and in Munich. And in fact, in May of that year, there would be a big Russian monarchist, sort of pan-Russian monarchist gathering in Reichenhall, Germany. Is Reichenhall the name of the building, or is it the name of the place? Yeah, I'm making an idiot of myself, but more or less in Munich, I think, which, as you know, was really the center for National Socialism, or would be, and for German nationalism in general. So there would be that Reichenhall conference, and I'm happy to say that Dmitri did not touch that with a 10-foot pole. That's an American idiom that I shouldn't use, actually, but he stayed well away from that. But Galeevsky was there, and Galeevsky would have been there if he had any, as I suspect, any intelligence role at all. So I don't hold Galeevsky, I don't hold it against him to have gone to this ultra-right-wing monarchist conference later that year in May 1921. All right, I'll stop talking now, and I'm going to do the other video. So I hope some of you at least will watch it. Who knows, you might find it interesting. And otherwise, we will be talking in the next diary section. We'll be talking, as I said, more in detail about why he decided. He makes it sound like it was a more or less last-minute decision. I mean, it couldn't have been that last minute because he had to get in touch with Galeevsky and ask him to go to Berlin. But he decided while he was in Copenhagen that he was going to go to Berlin, and he offers some explanation of that. And he also describes very colorfully how he is received, the king/prime minister arriving on business of state, how he is received by these zealots in Berlin. So come back for that, and I'll see you next time.